£17 million lump sum, £400,000 per year for office costs. But the jewels, the palaces, the title, all taken back. Diana's divorce settlement wasn't a negotiation, it was a theft. Before we explore the financial details of Diana's divorce, please consider subscribing to the Diana Stories and hitting the like button. Your support helps us investigate every aspect of Diana's story. When Princess Diana and Prince Charles divorced in 1996, it was one of the most expensive and closely watched divorce settlements in history. The numbers seemed enormous: £17 million upfront, plus ongoing payments for office expenses. But when you examine the details of what Diana actually received versus what she gave up, the settlement looks far less generous. In fact, many experts and observers have argued that Diana was significantly shortchanged in a negotiation where she had little real power against the full weight of the British royal establishment. The breakdown of the marriage. To understand the divorce settlement, we need to understand the context. Diana and Charles married in 1981 in what seemed like a fairy tale wedding, but the marriage was troubled from the start. Charles was still in love with Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana struggled with bulimia, depression, and the pressures of royal life. By the early 1990s, the marriage was effectively over. Charles and Diana were living separate lives. The tabloids were filled with stories about both of their extramarital affairs. Diana had given the devastating Panorama interview in 1995, where she famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The Queen finally had enough. In December 1995, she wrote letters to both Charles and Diana, urging them to divorce quickly. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a command from the monarch. Diana and Charles would divorce, and they would do it on terms acceptable to the royal family. Diana's initial position. When divorce negotiations began, Diana's team initially took an aggressive position. Some reports suggest Diana wanted as much as £50 million. Her lawyers argued she deserved substantial compensation for everything she had given up by marrying into the royal family and for the years of unhappiness she had endured. Diana also wanted to retain her title as Her Royal Highness, Princess of Wales. This title represented her status and her connection to William and Harry. It gave her standing in public life and respect in international circles. Losing it would be a significant blow to her position and influence. Diana wanted to keep Kensington Palace as her residence. She had lived there since her marriage and had made it her home. She wanted continued security provided by the royal family. She wanted ongoing financial support for her office and charitable work. Essentially, Diana wanted to remain a princess in everything but marriage. She wanted financial security, royal status, and the ability to continue her public and charitable work with the support and standing that came from her royal connection. The royal family's position was very different. They wanted Diana out of the royal family as completely as possible. The Queen and Prince Philip, in particular, were furious about the Panorama interview and Diana's public criticism of Charles and the institution. From the palace's perspective, Diana had embarrassed the monarchy. She had violated the unwritten rules about royal privacy and loyalty. She had made Charles look bad, and by extension, made the entire royal family look dysfunctional. They wanted to minimize her ongoing connection to the institution. The palace was willing to provide financial settlement. They recognized Diana couldn't simply be cast aside with nothing. but they wanted to strip away as much of her royal status and privilege as possible. They wanted to make clear that Diana was no longer part of the royal family, even though she was the mother of the future king. The negotiation pressure. Diana was in a weak negotiating position, and the royal family knew it. She wanted to be free from the unhappy marriage, but she didn't want to lose everything. She needed financial security, but also status and standing to continue her work. The palace applied pressure. They made clear that if Diana didn't accept reasonable terms, the negotiation could drag on for years. They hinted that Diana's cooperation would affect her relationship with William and Harry. They suggested that fighting too hard would damage her public image and reputation. Diana's own lawyers advised her that fighting the full weight of the royal establishment would be exhausting, expensive, and potentially unsuccessful. The Queen's intervention and direct order to divorce meant this wasn't a negotiation between equals. Diana was being told to accept terms or face consequences. The final settlement terms. In July 1996, Charles and Diana's divorce was finalized. The settlement terms were financial payment. Diana received a lump sum of £17 million. This was paid immediately upon divorce finalization. Office costs. Diana would receive £400,000 per year to maintain an office and staff to support her public and charitable work. Residence. Diana would continue to live at Kensington Palace. Apartments 8 and 9 would remain her London home. Access to royal transport. Diana could use royal flights and transportation for official engagements when appropriate. Security. Diana would receive some ongoing security support, though not to the same level as working royals. What Diana lost. The settlement terms sound substantial until you consider what Diana gave up or lost. Title. Diana lost the title Her Royal Highness. She would be known as Diana, Princess of Wales, but without the HRH designation. This was a significant demotion in status. She was still Princess of Wales, but only by virtue of having been married to Charles, not as a royal in her own right. Royal jewels. Most of the jewellery Diana had worn during her marriage belonged to the royal family, not to Diana personally. These pieces had to be returned. Diana kept only jewellery that had been given to her personally as gifts or that she had purchased herself. The most valuable royal pieces went back to the royal collection. Royal properties. Diana had no claim to any royal properties beyond her right to continue living at Kensington Palace. She couldn't use other royal residences. She had no ownership stake in anything. Royal status. Diana was no longer a working royal. She wouldn't appear on the Buckingham Palace balcony for events. She wouldn't be part of official royal tours or functions. She was effectively divorced from the institution, not just from Charles. Security and support. While Diana received some ongoing security, it was reduced from what she had as Princess of Wales. She also lost the full support system of royal staff and resources. The £17 million question. £17 million sounds like an enormous amount of money, and in 1996 it was substantial. Adjusted for inflation, it would be worth approximately £35 million, or about $45 million in today's money. But was it fair compensation for what Diana gave up? Consider what Diana brought to the marriage and the royal family. Diana revitalized the monarchy's public image. She made the royal family relevant and beloved in ways it hadn't been for decades. Her charity work, her warmth with the public, and her charisma brought enormous positive attention to the institution. Diana gave the royal family 2 heirs. William and Harry secured the succession. Diana raised them during their crucial early years, shaping them into the men they would become. Diana sacrificed her privacy, her freedom, and ultimately her happiness by marrying into this family. She endured a loveless marriage, public humiliation over Charles's continuing affair with Camilla, and constant media harassment. From this perspective, £17 million seems inadequate. Diana arguably deserved far more for what she contributed and what she endured. The comparison to other royal divorces. When compared to other high-profile royal divorces, Diana's settlement looks mixed. Princess Anne's divorce from Mark Phillips in 1992 was much less expensive, but Anne was much less prominent than Diana and brought less to the royal family. Sarah Ferguson's divorce from Prince Andrew in 1996, the same year as Diana's, resulted in a settlement of approximately £3 million, plus continued residence at Sunning Hill Park. Sarah's settlement was smaller than Diana's, but Sarah also had less prominence and shorter marriage to Andrew. In the context of royal divorces, Diana's settlement was among the largest, but the royal family isn't exactly generous with divorce settlements. They protect their wealth and limit payouts wherever possible. The office costs arrangement. The £400,000 per year for office costs was meant to allow Diana to maintain staff and continue her public and charitable work. This sounds generous, but it came with strings attached. Diana had to account for how this money was spent. It wasn't personal income she could use freely. It was specifically for maintaining an office, paying staff salaries, and covering expenses related to her public role. £400,000 per year sounds substantial, but maintaining a high-level office with multiple staff members, security considerations, travel costs, and the other expenses of Diana's public life was expensive. Diana sometimes supplemented this money with her own funds to maintain the level of activity she wanted. After Diana's death, this annual payment obviously stopped. It had been meant to last only during Diana's lifetime and wasn't inheritable by William and Harry. The HRH title controversy. The loss of the HRH title was perhaps the most painful aspect of the divorce settlement for Diana. This wasn't primarily about vanity or status. It had practical implications. Without HRH, Diana technically had to curtsy to her own sons once they became adults. She was outranked by virtually every other member of the royal family. In royal protocol and at formal events, she had diminished standing. Diana fought hard to keep the HRH title, but the palace was adamant. The Queen herself apparently insisted on this point. They wanted to make clear that Diana was no longer part of the royal family in any official capacity. Diana publicly said she was happy to give up the title because she had her children's love, and that was what mattered. But privately, she was hurt and humiliated by losing it. It felt like a deliberate diminishment, a way of putting her in her place and punishing her for the Panorama interview and her public criticisms. The jewelry situation. The question of jewelry was particularly contentious. Diana had worn spectacular royal jewels throughout her marriage. These included tiaras, necklaces, bracelets, and other pieces worth millions of pounds collectively. Most of these jewels belonged to the Queen or the royal collection, not to Diana personally. They had been loaned to Diana to wear during her time as Princess of Wales. With the divorce, they had to be returned. Diana was allowed to keep jewelry that had been given to her personally by Charles or others, as well as pieces she had purchased herself. But the most valuable and historically significant pieces went back to the royal collection. This caused some confusion and dispute over what exactly Diana owned versus what she had borrowed. The sapphire and diamond engagement ring, for example, technically belonged to Diana because it was her engagement ring. She kept it, and eventually it went to William, who gave it to Kate Middleton. But many other spectacular pieces Diana had been photographed wearing over the years weren't hers to keep. This contributed to the sense that Diana was being stripped of much of what had made her Princess of Wales. The Kensington Palace arrangement. Diana's right to continue living at Kensington Palace was important. This had been her home for 15 years. She had decorated apartments 8 and 9 to her taste. William and Harry had grown up there. It was the one place Diana felt was truly hers. The settlement allowed Diana to remain at Kensington Palace for her lifetime. However, it was clear this was a privilege, not an ownership right. Diana lived there at the pleasure of the Queen. If she violated terms of the divorce or behaved in ways the royal family found unacceptable, this privilege could theoretically be revoked. After Diana's death, the apartments reverted to the Crown. They weren't part of Diana's estate that went to William and Harry. Eventually, William and Kate moved into Kensington Palace themselves, but into different apartments. Was it enough? So was Diana's divorce settlement fair? Opinions vary, but many observers think Diana deserved more. Diana transformed the monarchy's public image. She brought warmth, compassion, and relevance to an institution that had seemed cold and distant. Her charitable work, particularly on issues like AIDS and landmines, had global impact. She made the royal family matter to a new generation. Diana gave up her privacy, her freedom, and years of her life to an unhappy marriage. She endured public humiliation, media harassment, and a loveless relationship while trying to raise 2 children in the most scrutinized environment imaginable. For all of this, Diana received £17 million and the right to continue living in one palace. She lost her title, her status, her security, and most of the jewels and possessions associated with her role as Princess of Wales. Some argue Diana was well compensated. £17 million was substantial money, and Diana wasn't left destitute. She had financial security and could continue her public work. But others argue Diana deserved far more. She was the most famous woman in the world, had done immeasurable good for the royal family's reputation, and had sacrificed enormously. £17 million seems inadequate compensation. especially when the royal family's total wealth is in the billions. The power dynamic. Perhaps the most important factor in understanding the divorce settlement is the power dynamic. This wasn't a negotiation between equals. Diana, despite her fame and popularity, was one person against the full institutional weight of the British monarchy. The royal family has virtually unlimited legal resources. They have centuries of experience protecting their wealth and interests. They have direct access to the highest levels of British society and government. They operate behind layers of privacy and secrecy that make challenging them difficult. Diana had good lawyers, but she was ultimately in a weak position. She wanted to be free from the marriage, and the royal family knew it. They could drag out negotiations indefinitely if she didn't accept their terms. They could make her life difficult in countless ways. Diana's lawyers advised her to accept the settlement, not because it was necessarily fair, but because it was the best she was likely to get. Fighting for more would be costly, exhausting, and probably unsuccessful. Conclusion. Diana's divorce settlement of £17 million plus ongoing office costs seemed generous on its surface, but when examined closely, considering everything Diana gave up and everything she contributed to the royal family, it looks less fair. Diana lost her title, her status, most of the jewels she had worn, and her position within the royal institution. She kept only her residence at one palace and financial support to continue limited public work. The settlement reflected the power dynamic of the divorce. Diana was negotiating from weakness against an institution with virtually unlimited resources and centuries of experience protecting its interests. She accepted terms not because they were fair, but because they were the best she could get. Diana's divorce settlement tells us something important about how the royal family treats those who marry in and then leave. Even someone as beloved and transformative as Diana, someone who arguably did more for the monarchy's public image than anyone in decades, was ultimately treated as expendable. She was given financial compensation and then systematically stripped of the status, privileges, and possessions that had come with being Princess of Wales. Was it theft, as we suggested at the beginning? Perhaps that's too strong, but it certainly wasn't the generous settlement these £17 million headlines suggested. Diana deserved better, and history has recognized that, even if the divorce settlement terms didn't.